Alright guys, thanks for tuning into the video here or clicking on the video. I'm going to get right into it here. So basically what I'm making is an end table for my den. These are two 5/4 boards of spalted maple. It's basically just maple, but spalted is just, it's been allowed to initiate the stages of decay, basically. So it's got really cool black lines through it, which I'll show you here in just a bit. Going over to the miter saw to cut off the edges. There's a couple of split ends, so I was just kind of cleaning those up before I got into making the tabletops with these two boards. So just cutting it up there. And it's over to the joiner. So you can kind of see it's got that initial stage of decay, which gives it that black line. And basically what I'm doing here is running it down the joiner in order to get a flat face on one side. From here, you reference that flat face and you do an edge joint, which will square up that side as well. Now from here, we take that board, we run it through the planer in order to get an even thickness throughout the board. This will ensure that the tabletop that I'm going to make out of this is perfectly uniform throughout. So there's a time lapse of taking it through the planer. This is the G0959 from Grizzly. It's a joiner and a planer together. 12-inch helical head. I got to do a review on that at some point, but you can kind of see what it does. You can see the grain and the black lines throughout. It's definitely my favorite wood by far. So from here over to the table saw, basically this is just squaring up that final edge that we haven't touched yet in order to ensure that we have a perfect rectangle in theory. So doing that on both sides, and then from there we glue up the tabletop, which is pretty straightforward for the most part. I'm getting it clamped up here, and then I'll put clamps on the end too, just to ensure that the edges don't lift up too much right there. I just want to make sure that they're as close to uniform as possible. That way when I go to sand, it makes it fairly easy, and I'm not hitting a ridge basically. All right, here's where it gets a little weird. I originally thought that I wanted to do that at what you just saw as the tabletop, and then make a mitered box in order to set the tabletop on top of, and then from there I was just going to make legs for on the bottom half of the table basically. So basically what I'm doing is I'm cutting out all the miters. I think that's like a 3-inch piece, like the width, and then I'm marking out where I want to use dominoes in order to ensure like a snug fit. So for those that don't know, the domino joiner, which is what I'm using here, is it's basically a tool that mortises out of holes, and then you put dominoes in them. It helps with alignment and then strength too, a lot of times, depending on what you're building. So that's what I'm using here. A couple close-up shots of the holes that it does mortise out. Again, this is all kind of unnecessary. I figured I'd put it in and explain to you what I was doing because my project changed a couple times throughout building this, but I'm really happy with the end product. So I figured I would show you, how I went through the whole process of building the box, like you see here, doing a dry fit on it, getting a nice fit, taking it apart, and then applying wood glue to it, and then clamping it up in order to ensure there wouldn't be any movement on it. So that's basically what I'm doing here. And then from there, like I said, I put the tabletop on top of it. I probably should have did that earlier before I went through the whole process of making this. But I'll use it for something else, maybe some sort of like picture frame or something like that for another project on another day. So getting it clamped up here, and then I didn't film it, but I put the tabletop on top of it after, and I hated it. So moving on, I grabbed some black walnut that I had laying over in the shop, and this is what I use to make the legs out of. So this is 2, I believe, 5/4 pieces of black walnut stock. Again, like I explained before, jointing the face and then switching over to edge jointing in order to make sure that I get that 90 that I'm looking for. And then similar to what I did before with the maple, back through the planer, which I didn't record, and then squaring up the final edges here on the table saw. All right, so next is measuring out the dimensions of the leg. First thing I'm measuring out is where I want to do like a cross lap. That's what I come to realize, that I wanted to connect the legs to the tabletop by doing a cross lap. So I'm just measuring that out right here. And then I also wanted to measure out some sort of angle on the legs. Um, I wanted it to go in like that. And basically, the way that I figured the easiest way to go about this was to take some 1/4 inch plywood that I had laying around here, which you see, and then some double-sided tape, push it down on top of it, and then run it over through the table saw. Now, the easier way to go about this would probably be to do it with like a longer piece of 1/4 inch plywood. I didn't have any. I just had this laying there. So basically what I did was I ran the first half of the cut through, got to the bottom of that 1/4 inch ply, took it off, reapplied it, and then ran it back through basically. So just had to go slow here just to make sure that the template got up to the fence. And then once I got it there, it was smooth sailing from there, and cut out the rest of the leg. I believe it's 3 inches at the top, then 2 1/8 at the bottom or something like that. I'll have to double check. I think it might be a little bit more than 2 1/8, but that's the final shot of what I was going for there. Just a slight angle, nothing too crazy, but I knew I didn't want it to be square. So basically here what I'm doing is just taking my track saw and squaring up the tabletop. What I'm doing on the tabletop now is just measuring out where those cross laps are going to go. Now, there's a couple of reasons I did this. One, I wanted to do a dry fit just to make sure that the legs actually fit snugly and they were uniform on all sides. But also, as you'll see in the next shot, I did want to do some sort of decorative edge on the tabletop as well. So basically, what I do is I go over, grab my palm router or handheld router, and I use a 1/8 inch chamfer bit in order to kind of give it a decorative edge. Now it's over to the miter saw in order to cut out the laps that I was looking to do for the legs. If you're interested in doing anything like this, or you have like a project that you want to do some sort of laps with, whether it just be like a standard lap joint, like a mitered half lap, dovetail crossed lap, or just like a cross lap like this, or whatever you want to do. Most miter saws do have a trenching feature, which is on the side. I think on the DeWalt one, it's on the right side. There's a little latch that you flip down, and then there's a screws. And basically, what it does is it sets the saw blade to stop at a certain distance down. So here, I'm just kind of showing you the tight fit that I had. That's what I was looking for, but I wasn't super happy with how far it went in. So I ended up going down about twice as far as I did originally on the trench. I want to say it was like 1 3/8 is what was that was the final dimension. Um, but again, using the trenching feature in order to make any sort of lap joint is definitely recommended, unless you have a crosscut sled, I guess, too. But for your table saw, which I don't have, so that's why I did this. All right, now it's back over to the table saw in order to take one of those spalted maple pieces, split it down the middle, and then this is what I end up using for one of my stretcher pieces to connect in between the table legs. So the way that I went about this is I took a couple 3-inch nails, uh, just put them into the workbench. I don't have a very nice workbench, obviously, so I felt okay doing this. I put it in there, and then I pulled it back to make sure it was straight up and down, and then I took one of those edges from the black walnut that I used earlier. It was pretty uniform on both sides, and I basically just kind of pulled it up in order to make some sort of template. That way I can make a cove cut. I wanted it to be like an arch in between. So this was the easiest way that I could think of doing it. It actually worked out really well. Surprisingly enough, I don't have like a compass or anything like that, so I figured this would be fine. And then going over to the bandsaw, cutting it out. All right, now it's on to everyone's favorite part of the project, sanding. A lot of sanding. Basically, the process that I usually do is I take 150 grit, 180 grit, and then 220 if I have it. I didn't have it here in this case, so I ended up using 240. But I usually start at 150 and then make my way up. And then I wipe down with mineral spirits in between each sand just to make sure that there's no residue left over. I found that it works out pretty well and it yields pretty good results. And then it was over to the router table. I believe this is a 1/2 inch round over bit that I have in there, just to kind of soften the edge on the legs and again make them look not so boxy. I was looking for more of a modern look, so that's why I did this. And like I said, I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Now this is just 240, just to take that rough edge off. I would recommend doing it by hand if you're going to do anything like this. Don't use the orbital on it just because you don't want to kind of flatten it off too much. And then same thing here, just doing it by hand in order to get any sort of little nicks or burn marks from the palm router out and just clean it up a little bit, that's all. All right, that is it. The spalted maple end table. I appreciate you guys watching. If you made it all the way through, I appreciate you so much. If you could subscribe to the channel and give it a thumbs up, that would be great. I know it's cringy, but I do have to say it. Let me know in the comments too if you guys would do anything different on the build. Would you have done maple legs as opposed to using the black walnut? Would you have made it more of like a Victorian look versus a modern? I guess let me know what you think in the comments. But either way, I appreciate you watching. And yeah, until the next one. Thanks.